back to the class, everyone. The Beskar Armor Mando pack is officially live in game and ready to be purchased. And while we've already discussed that it, yes, is a little bit of a fall from value when it comes to the Ray packs, it, like every other single Lightspeed bundle, is one of the best things to buy in the game. That leaves us with a few problems, and today we're going to solve them by ranking out all the Zetas and what order you should do them, and how do we actually even use these characters. So again, I expressed this in a previous video, but one of the great things about this new Lightspeed bundle is it doesn't just give you the characters Cardoon, Mando, Grief, Queel, and IG-11, enough to complete the event for Beskar Armor Mando himself, but it gives you them all at Relic 5, meaning you don't really have to put that much more work into them as far as gear and relics go to be able to get them working. You can already shove them on a team and start getting use out of them in a variety of game modes. So that's what we want to talk about. Like, where do you actually put them? What other characters do you now need to work up? What holes have this left in your roster? And then on top of that, I do want to take a brief moment to talk about the Zeta order that we should be using, because while the Lightspeed bundles are overall good value, they don't come with Zetas, and it kind of creates this even larger backlog where we really have to prioritize the ones that are the absolute best, and a lot of the times the luxury ones that might not be terrible are going to have to be left by the wayside, at least for a little bit. So first up, let's talk about those people who are in kind of a tight position. Let's say you're a fairly new player, maybe 3 million GP and under, and you just bought the pack because it looked like a good deal, and quite frankly, as far as money goes in the game from a comparative value, it is a really good deal. The thing is, you probably don't have a lot of fleshed out teams yet to be able to stick them on somewhere. And we'll get to the people who are more advanced and have maybe 7 or 8 million GP, and they can start building out some of the better teams. But this right here is what I want to call out right now for those more tight rosters, and that is the traditional Beskar Armor Mando team. Now, this team doesn't make its way much around that more in the end game because of how things have advanced, but this is still a really solid team. And for those of you who aren't aware, the whole dynamic of how this team works is Queel is going to have a really high base speed, or higher than the rest of the team. He's going to go first. He is then going to give all of his allies turn meter via his I Have Spoken ability, as you can see here. And then once that happens, your Beskar Armor Mando can go into his crouching position, or his poop position, if you will, where he gets ready to launch off all of his birds. And then the rest of your characters like IG-11, Nest, as well as Cardoon will all launch AoEs, building him up to 20 stacks of his Whistling Birds, and you will just one-shot a character right off the board because of how much damage those birds give Beskar Armor Mando. It's really a great combo, this exact comp, because IG-11, if he goes right after Beskar Mando, he can apply Tenacity down and start generating turn meter via Bam's leadership ability, where every single time an enemy takes damage, you gain 2% turn meter. So IG-11 will go, uses AoE, everyone will take damage, you'll gain turn meter, Nest will then go again. You will also gain turn meter from Nest AoE, and she will also reduce the enemy's turn meter because that's what her AoE does. And then on top of it, Cardoon will go ahead and proceed to do the same thing again with her AoE. And what you're going to end up with is your Beskar Armor Mando is going to be completely primed with his 20 birds. And again, as we previously mentioned, you're just going to knock one character right out. And those Whistling Birds also prevent revives. So if you're looking for a team to be able to use these characters, you can't just use them together. I realize that doesn't happen every single time out there. I guess you can't like use the rebels you use to beat Palpatine to go with Palpatine. This is kind of an outlier in that situation where you can actually use the requirements very well with the legendary you're getting itself. If you already have done that, the 2 bounty hunter units being Grief Karga and Mando, they really slot into any and every bounty hunter team. I realize Bossk has always been a popular choice because, quite frankly, he's a good universal leader for bounty hunters, but he's also been involved in some of the other Lightspeed bundle packs. So you can make, I mean, this is a pretty cheap team to make. You know, they don't have to be Relic 8 or anything like that, but you just put Dengar and Boba, who are fairly accessible, and again, who are part of other packs. I guess I don't think Dengar is actually yet, but Boba Fett, who is part of another pack, and really any other bounty hunters that work in these last 2 slots. If you have a GAC Omicron, you can throw Zam in there for fun. If you have Fennec, she's not terrible either. You can switch out Aura Lead, but for the most part, just stick them in a bounty hunter team with Bossk, whether as leader or as another team, and you will do fine. We'll talk more about how this team works when we get to Zetas, because as you probably previously saw, the most important Zetas are theirs to be able to get the modern bounty hunter hunter team running and be able to kill the high tier things that it can kill. So this again was more for the tight roster. Now, if you have a more advanced roster where you've already farmed things, you probably have already cleared out some Galactic Legends or some of the higher fleets, so you have more to work with because you naturally just have a more advanced roster. You've covered more requirements at R5 and whatnot. So these are the teams that we can start to suggest. So if you already have all these teams done, the Dash Scoundrel team is one of the better, really probably the best Scoundrel team out there right now, with Dash himself leading. He has a very nice GAC Omicron that, for those who are unaware, was custom made pretty much for Vader Chewbacca, who is going to allow every single Scoundrel ally to revive as long as there aren't any like permakills or anything like that. So what you end up doing is you get stuck behind IG-11's taunt, you have to kill him, and Vander will just keep reviving him the entire time. Nest even adds quite a bit to this team as well. She doesn't really have the cascading effect of turn mirror like she does in the BAM team, but she pretty much makes the team trooper proof. Even if you can't get your Queel all that fast, Nest becomes very hard to kill unless the person knows exactly what they're doing with troopers, because they get stuck behind her protection up shell, and even if they kill everyone else, they will eventually get stuck behind her. But Vandor does some nice things in reducing the enemy's offense as well, and then Queel giving all the boosted stats to Dash is just a really nice add-on. So the team, again, a little bit better than the BAM team. Going to cost you a few more resources, but again, if you have a more advanced roster, let's say you have Profundity, so you already have Dash at least I believe it's Relic 5, it actually might be Relic 7, but you have Dash at Relics regardless, and you have again some of these other pieces that you can use in there. Next up for Cara Dune, you can use her in this Mon Mothma team, and this is kind of the premium Mon Mothma team. If you're with more strapped resources, you can swap out Hoth Rebel Scout and PAL for Biggs as well as Wedge. The team does just fine. Cara Dune has the capability to work in a Scoundrel and or Rebel team. It is all of these are really very vulnerable to Iden, any Mon Mothma variation that is, but that doesn't mean you can't use it on offense. Even at the minimum as a cleanup team, it's still one of the most important cleanup teams in my roster for really heavy stuff out there like Lord Vader as well as Jabba the Hutt. But if you're wanting to use the team on defense or offense, these three are the really crucial ones. Kyle Katarn is a requirement for Starkiller, so you have even more value there, even outside of what he does inside the team. And even further than that, I don't want to talk about it too much just because most people don't have Afra currently unlocked. But one of the other outside teams, for those of you especially who have Jedi Knight Luke, is if you use Sana, who is a requirement for Afra, you can actually put to use a lot of the other crossover characters that you get when you have to get CLS or Jedi Knight Luke, like Stormtrooper Han, like Lando, like Rolo, and just kind of fit them all into this team. Cara works very well. Sana Staros was specifically made to work with Rebel allies that are tanks, or whenever non-tank Rebel allies Sana's damage, they also do other things. So you have this kind of nice synergy going back and forth here. Cara really isn't the best character in the game, but she has the use to be a decent character in multiple teams and makes her pretty versatile. Next up, and kind of last, we're going to talk about the Lord Vader killer. So again, this is for more advanced rosters that are facing Galactic Legends on a regular basis. This is a strategy out there that's pretty cool where you use Fennec lead, who whenever the debuffs on her team are dispelled, they get contract essentially, and Lord Vader does a ton of debuffs. Grief dispels them, you get instant contract, and then bam, the reason why he's here is because obviously Grief and Mando are kind of providing, or Grief and this Mando are providing the cleanse, turn meter, instant kill, all that good stuff. But BAM is essential to beating any Lord Vader with Maul. If they have him on the team at all, you absolutely 1000% need to have this Zeta, where once they fall below 75% health, he will proc a bonus turn where he can then put damage immunity on the character. If you don't have this, Maul will literally just run over any and every character with his 5 big hits in the very beginning. And if one of those characters is Fennec, it's an immediate game over. You got nothing. Go home. It's actually really not fun. So BAM in there kind of helps prevent that. There is some RNG as far as if he can actually land the damage immunity depending on how Maul actually hits the damage thresholds. But overall, it's the most consistent version of the Fennec counter versus Lord Vader that you can have out there. So that's kind of how we would use all the characters depending on where your roster is at. Now onto the Zeta order. This is fairly simple, but let's go ahead and get right into it. First up, we have Mando and Grief themselves. These are the highest priority. Like, you really have to have these. Bounty Hunters have the highest ceiling out there for what they can counter out of all the characters that you are getting, and their Zetas are important. If you look at Grief's, very important, the Sweeten the Deal Zeta he has is dispel all debuffs on all Bounty Hunter allies, and allies with payouts active gain tenacity up for 2 turns. The reason why this is important is because outside of Hutt Cartel, the Jabba team, there is no AoE dispel for all of Bounty Hunters. You don't get to have this. If you're up against any team that's using like an AoE stun or daze or ability block or shock or whatever, you're just stuck with it. You can't get around it. You really have to have grief out there to be able to dispel all the things that are going on, really regardless of what the bounty hunter team overall looks like. Mando's is also very important, where he is going to, every single time he crits, he is going to be giving turn meter not only to himself but also to his allies. This is one of the reasons why the team can get so far ahead without having to have really fast modding on every single character. What you can do is you can utilize both Grief and Bosk's mass attacks to when they call Mando in. Mando won't just be giving himself turn meter, but he'll be giving it to the rest of the team. And you can put yourself in a situation specifically with Aura Lead, or actually with Boss Lead, depending on the enemy comp, so that Mando can annihilate someone before the match even gets going. So those are, I would say, by far the most two important to have. After that, especially if you're trying to work on the BAM team, these two are essential to what the BAM team wants to do. Again, Protective Intuition, we talked about this a little bit, where this is what is going to cause the bonus turns, the 75% health for him to proc and give out damage immunity. Without this, both the normal BAM team and the bounty hunter team that we talked about before are extremely hindered. It's something you really want. It's one of the things that actually causes issues with the comp. And then Quill just has some really nice stat sharing on top of that, where he will give all other droid or scoundrel, or actually droid and scoundrel allies, his max health, offense, potency, and then protection until the first time he is defeated. So more stats are always good, especially when he's sharing offense to our good friend Mando and his birds. And then just, you know, protection and health is good for the rest of the team for overall survivability. These two are not really niche, but just come in secondary category, and they both revolve around the same thing. So when we look at Bam's lead, the Zeta part of his lead is this turn meter right here. Whenever an enemy takes damage, scoundrel allies gain 2% turn meter. Now this seems kind of lackluster, and it, depending on the comp you're fighting, it can actually really cause a lot of issues. And the reason why is, this is not every single time that you do damage. This isn't every single time that you take a turn, use your Beskar or your AoE, and just get the hit out. This is every time an enemy takes damage. What this means is, when you start putting out damage over times, thermals, burning, all these things are going to cause the enemy to take damage outside of your turn. You're going to get turn meter for all that too. And that's why we've really paired IG-11 right next to our good friend Mando here, because when you combine what he does with what Bam does, this is how, loop is the wrong word, but you can just get massive amounts of turn meter back to back to back and destroy the enemy team. For each debuff dispelled from allies, IG-11 inflicts damage over time for 2 turns on a random enemy, which can't be evaded. So I really don't care about damage over time. I don't really care about which enemy it goes on. All I care about is the enemy is now having to deal with more damage, and because they're dealing with more damage, my team's getting more turn meter, and we just get to cycle through them, because the more turns we get, the more damage we can do, and the vicious cycle for the enemy just keeps on going on and on and on. I guess for a little bit of context for everyone to know how often this is going to happen, IG-11, every single time he takes a turn, he dispels all debuffs from his entire team. So if you're up against a really debuff heavy enemy team, you can spam a ton of damage over time to the enemy team, generate a bunch of turn meter, and then, like we said, just kind of wreck the enemy team. Now, the ones that are a little bit more luxury, they're not terrible. They're really not. I like having both of them, but they're not the personality of the team. They're like these edge cases where they could be nice. Our good friend Cara Dune here, she gets to revive whenever she has potency up. This can sometimes time out Wampa. That's probably the most impressive thing I've seen it do, which is nice, but it's really not everything. And then Grief's bringing them in cold. I actually do really enjoy this one. I realize 20% damage seems like very little for the mass attack, but the reason why it matters is because if you do kill the enemy with this, you get all these buffs, so having any more damage you need could be really nice, because you're not just getting 20% more damage, you're getting the option to get all these buffs. Because if you were to use this and you get them right into the red, it really kind of stinks. Like, you would have rather just killed them, gotten all the buffs, and then continue to take down whatever else you need to take down. So thank you guys for watching. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if we would like any more info on the other packs, or even just like go more in depth of how we mod these characters. I kind of touched briefly on the turn order and overall mechanics, but again, always let me know if you would like more. Thank you guys for watching. Until the next time, stay awesome.